I felt puzzled and glanced at the glass decoration beside the family shrine. In the mirror, I saw myself, my face pale and shriveled like gold foil, a sickly yellow, terrifying sight. Black lines crawled across my forehead as if they were alive. I stared wide-eyed as a wave of sharp, twisting pain rose from the left side of my abdomen, relentless, surging like a tide. I looked at my mother. She seemed to be saying something, but I couldn't hear a word. It felt like the world was collapsing, yet I didn't lose consciousness. Then I felt something moving inside me, shifting between my stomach and intestines. It hurts, it really fucking hurts. The pain lasted a full 10 minutes, each second dragging on like an eternity. My mind was unusually clear, and every bit of that pain was vivid, seared into my memory. Everything around me twisted, like countless evil ghosts crawling their way out of the ground. Later, I heard about pain scales. They say the pain of breaking a rib is a 1, and childbirth is about 10. I've always believed that what I felt that day was at least twice as bad as childbirth, because I've broken ribs a few times since then. When my consciousness returned, I found myself lying on the ground, drenched in sweat, as though I'd been pulled out of a river. My parents stood frozen, trembling, too scared to help me. A puddle of sweat, urine, and feces, things I couldn't control, reeked in the living room. My mother started cursing furiously, yelling at the air, "You wretched old jerk, you even messed up your own grandson. You deserve to die miserably. Don't come back to bother my Luzu again." Her words were harsh, but it's a tradition in our hometown. If a deceased elder returns to haunt their family, you must curse them to drive them away. I lay there, my limbs ice cold, trembling as I slowly realized this wasn't a nightmare. It was real. Shivering, I struggled to get up. Then a chilling thought hit me. Today was the 7th day after my grandmother's death. That night, I spent half the night studying 12 Methods of Subduing Mountains, the old book my grandmother had left me. The writing was messy, my emotions were all over the place, and fear of the unknown kept me from making much sense of it. The next morning, I took a bus to the city and went to a top-tier hospital. After registering, I underwent a full-body checkup, which cost me nearly 6,000 yuan. By the afternoon, an old doctor told me I was in excellent shape, super healthy, in fact. Not only was I free of the usual health issues most people have, but my body seemed to be improving in some ways. The X-ray pictures showed nothing unusual inside me. I explained my situation to the old doctor. He was silent for a long time before offering two possibilities. 1, the pain was a psychological or neurological hallucination. This sometimes happens to drug addicts, people with mental illnesses, or those exposed to certain stimulants like pollen or toxins. 2, there are things science can't explain, like cases from the realm of mysticism. For instance, what I experienced might be related to ancient practices like gu, a form of poison culturing passed down in southern China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and parts of Southeast Asia for ages. Some theorize that gu involves nurturing viruses in toxic creatures, but nobody really knows for sure. If it's really gu, medicine won't help, you'll need to find someone who knows how to deal with it. Our region has always been home to ethnic minorities. Administratively, it's a Miao and Dong autonomous prefecture. The old doctor had worked here for decades and seemed to know something but hesitated to say more, perhaps due to hospital rules. He just told me to look for someone. I didn't want to leave without a lead. After bugging him for a while, he finally mentioned an old Shenpa named Long Laolan in a Miao village under Jinping County. She was rumored to be very skilled. Hearing this, my face went pale. My grandmother's name was Long Laolan. On my way home, my business partner, A. Jen, called. He asked when I'd return, as there was trouble at our jewelry accessory shop. A girl shop assistant had quit. She trusted me the most, and A. Jen wanted me to go back and talk her out of it. We had about a dozen employees. At the time, Guangdong wasn't yet experiencing a labor shortage, but this girl was particularly good at her job, and losing her would be a shame. I wasn't in the mood to deal with it, so I asked why she quit. A. Jen said her boyfriend, a jobless scoundrel, who lived off her, talked her into going into the sea, as her salary couldn't cover their high expenses. By going into the sea, it meant becoming a prostitute. In Dongguan, many factory girls turned to sex work. This got even worse after the 2008 financial crisis. I pursed my lips, thinking of that girl with big, bright eyes that sparkled like two deep wells. I told A. Jen, I can't deal with it now. Tell her either I will help her find a decent man to settle down with, or she can get lost and never show her face to me again. I have no patience for such a bitch. A Jen sighed on the other end of the line. I remembered he might have had feelings for her. After returning home, I began carefully digging in the book of 12 methods of subduing mountains. Half an hour later, I found an entry about the golden silkworm goo, the one she had planted inside me. The entry explained the process. To create a golden silkworm goo, venomous creatures such as snakes, eels, centipedes, frogs, scorpions, earthworms, large green caterpillars, mantises, cockroaches, four-legged snakes, spiders, lizards, and black-headed iron ants must be caught within 3 days of the Dragon Boat Festival, the 5th day of the 5th lunar month. These creatures are sealed inside a large, brown earthen jar made of clay and left to fight, kill, and devour one another. The stronger ones eat the weaker, the more venomous ones consume the less venomous. Every night before sleep and every morning upon waking, prayers are offered over the jar. After about a year, only one creature remains. This lone survivor, transformed in form and color, is called the golden silkworm goo. But this is only the first step. The one I swallowed was not an ordinary goo. It was a life-bound goo that my grandmother had refined over decades. This particular golden silkworm goo, having been isolated for so long among sinister spirits from the underworld, had developed an extremely violent temperament. It becomes especially restless and wild whenever Yin energy intensifies. Only those born on July 15th and have experienced the opening of the Ghost Gate and the cleansing of Yin energy of the Ghost Festival can host it without their bodies bursting apart. Even then, the host must consume a specific herb called dragon fern to suppress the goo's ferocity. However, this dragon fern is no ordinary plant. It must have been woven into a hat and worn by a dwarf mule. The goo poison is fierce but is naturally afraid of dwarf mules. In many dialects, dwarf mule is a term of insult. For example, in Taiwan, it refers to a troublemaker. But in my family and region, it has only one meaning: mischievous mountain goblins or wild creatures. These dwarf mules are said to be just a few dozen centimeters tall, living deep in the mountains. They are always seen wearing red hats. They could be in different colors, green or purple, sometimes red and furry. They often appear in groups of 3 to 5 and are notorious for playing pranks on humans. Stories like farmers' lunches turned into stones, villagers cooking pots filled with dung after offending them, or people unknowingly eating mud and feeling full afterward. The red hats they wear are woven from dragon fern, a plant said to date back to the age of dinosaurs. Of course, these are just tales. Back in high school, my roommates shared countless wild legends like this. Whether they are true or not, it's hard to say. However, students from the villages west of Qingshan Mountain always seem to have the most detailed accounts. After spending the entire day poring over my grandmother's worn-out book, I finally told my parents over dinner about my plan to head to Qingshan Mountain to investigate. If this was fate, I had no choice but to face it. The thought of that excruciating pain still haunted me. It was so far beyond what the human body should endure that, for a fleeting moment, I'd even considered ending my life. My mother stared at my grandmother's portrait on the shrine, silent, sighing and wiping her tears. My father, on the other hand, suggested I stay with my uncle, who worked at the forest station in Qingshan Mountain. He believed my uncle could provide safety and support while I searched for clues. That very night, my father called my uncle, and early the next morning, I set off for Qingshan Mountain.